Start with a little prayer, also to pray for wisdom, to ask God for that gift. So we place into your hands, Lord, this evening for the Southampton CathSoc, this time of sharing together, of reflecting together, and of seeking your wisdom and opening ourselves to receive this gift of wisdom for our lives and for those that we have around us, for those that we serve. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world
without end. Amen.
Okay. So good evening to you. It's midday for me. It's 2 o'clock because I'm on the other side of the world. I'm at the moment in Colombia and stayed much longer than I had expected. Not surprisingly because of all the change of plans that we've all had this year. But this coming weekend I travel back to Europe, at this point to Italy. So here I am, and I'm very happy to join you. I'm very thankful and grateful for this invitation. I hear that you all have your classes online, and I know how tiring it is to be in front of a screen all day, because there's days that I have virtual meetings for hours on end, and it's exhausting. So it's definitely a strange and special time that we're going through. Trying times, no, as the title for tonight says. And I commend you for continuing to be faithful to your CathSoc, to the Southampton CathSoc, because it's at least a taste of something different. A bit of interaction with your fellow classmates outside of your virtual classrooms and all your work and academic work. And just because you have chosen to nourish your faith and your fellowship, I would say it's already a wise choice. So you're already on that road, that pathway to wisdom. And that's what our session is about tonight, seeking wisdom. That's the first part of the title, seeking wisdom. And by wisdom, we don't mean knowing a lot or knowing a lot of information, but actually, I want to ask you. So we're going to try and make this a little interactive so it's not just boring me speaking to you. But I'd like to hear from a few of you. Just spontaneously open your mic and say, for you, what is wisdom for you?
Knowing what to do.
Knowing what to do.
For me, it's very high ability to see the truth in things.
To see the truth in things. Very good. Anyone else? Any thought?
Power and love of the cross.
The wisdom of the cross. We go into St. Paul. And I think very appropriate for this time because they're trying times. From that Christian perspective, we'd say it's a time of cross. But seeing the truth in the reality that we're living in this difficult time, in the circumstances that we don't control, but we're invited to accept, that's where we figure out what to do, and how to act and how to take the next step. So thank you for those who have put their part. Others will have a chance further on. So what is wisdom? And let's see. What is wisdom? Oh, I think I skipped ahead. I just put some definitions from the dictionary. The quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. The quality of being wise. Another dictionary, I think the Webster Dictionary, remember, said ability to discern inner qualities and relationships, insight, good sense, judgment. So a lot of it has to do with that insight, inner light, that the light of truth, and that sense of judgment, of knowing what to do, of knowing what step to take. So we're going to look a bit at wisdom literature of the Hebrew Scriptures. And and some of the, well, just a few texts of the wisdom literature of the Hebrew Scriptures to help us delve into the depths of our lives as well. Because that search for wisdom is common to all cultures, and especially the cultures of the ancient Near East. We have collections of wisdom literature from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and ancient Greece. And the practical objective of this wisdom is that the human being might behave prudently, with prudence, and to have the ability to prosper in life. In Greece, this becomes what we know as philosophy. But in biblical revelation, also the Word of God takes on a form of wisdom. But it's inspired wisdom. So even in the cases where it best integrates human wisdom, it goes further, it goes beyond, it's of a different nature. It has a divine source. True wisdom comes from God. And God is the one who gives the human being, as it says in 1 Kings 3:9, a heart able to discern between good and evil. But, as we all know, human beings are tempted to acquire by our own strength this knowledge of good and evil, as we see in the story of the fall in Genesis 3:5. Then in Proverbs and all the different books of the wisdom literature, you'll have repeatedly the theme of the fear of God, the fear of the Lord. And it's the principle of wisdom. The wisdom literature of the Hebrew Scriptures. So today we're really focusing on the Hebrew Scriptures. A whole other evening would be about wisdom in terms of the New Testament and the wisdom of the cross. But just to specify, tonight is mainly focused on the Hebrew Scriptures. And to put into context the books of the wisdom literature, they were composed mainly after the Babylonian exile. And if you know a little bit of biblical history, it was a tremendous time of crisis for the people of Israel. They were kicked out of their land, of their promised land, by the neighboring bullying nations. And wisdom literature came about from their efforts to integrate what was going on in their lives, the human reflection, together with the religious faith in God, in God's law. So the human being began, has always been asking himself the same questions throughout history. What's my meaning and purpose? What's the meaning of suffering? Why do the just suffer and the evil prosper? And the typical understanding of the Old Testament, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, went along the lines of the theory of divine retribution. God rewards the good and punishes the evil. But actually, as the religious understanding of the people of Israel evolved, this begins to fall under its own weight. So we will see books such as Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, and Job that question this belief quite strongly, even if other wisdom books like Proverbs, which are more traditional, still uphold it. But we see today, well, actually, not all evil, not all good people prosper, and evil are punished. So we wonder, well, where is justice? When does that come about? All these sorts of questions start to come up in that search for wisdom. But each in its own way, the books of the wisdom literature try to give an answer to these existential questions. So we have here personified wisdom, A common theme is personified wisdom. Wisdom as a protective mother, as a nurturing wife. We see this also in Proverbs chapter 9, 1-6. And it's this feminine representation, not just as a figure of speech, but as a divine source, Lady Wisdom. And God can communicate her because God is wisdom par excellence. That divine wisdom is associated to all that which God does in the world. From the moment of creation, in Proverbs 8:31, and still directing the universe. So if you want to look at chapter 8 of the Book of Wisdom, throughout the history of salvation, God has sent wisdom on mission here on this earth. So what would you say wisdom is good for? I guess it kind of answers what some of you already answered it in some way at the very beginning, but apart from what people have said about making the right choices and knowing what's right and wrong, what else would you say wisdom is good for? Why do we seek wisdom? Why do we want to have wisdom?
I think sometimes wisdom can be quite comforting because it's sort of, as you're saying, sometimes highlights the truth in some ways. And so I think even if, as you're saying, the good aren't always rewarded and the bad aren't always punished, sometimes having that wisdom just there can help to comfort people in sort of trying times and that sort of thing.
I think sometimes wisdom is useful in being able to read the times and kind of translate what's going on in the world in the bigger picture, and maybe look forward to the future and see what might happen.
Yeah. It's a source of hope.
Yeah.
Vision, perspective.
Maybe it brings you closer to God at the same time, because you may start, because I guess God is wise, so if you get wise as well, you may see things almost as God sees them, maybe.
From God's eyes, from God's perspective. Yep, thank you. Yeah, wisdom is God. No, God is wisdom, and wisdom is the person of Christ. So it's not surprising that wisdom for human beings is a treasure superior to all. No, as it says in Wisdom, the book of Wisdom, chapter 7:7-14. She herself is a gift of God and distributes all of God's gifts. Life and joy, security, as Toby was saying, it's a sense of comfort, security, because when you're with God, you have that comfort, that security, that consolation. Grace and glory, riches and justice, and all virtues. And I think also that perspective towards the future, that we don't know, that we don't control, but that trust in God's justice. Okay, maybe now it doesn't seem like the good prosper and the evil perish, but we know that in the end, God will do justice. We don't know how or when or in what way, and we aren't the ones who make justice or do justice, but there's that trust that God will. And intimacy with wisdom is another form of intimacy with God himself, just as Pietro was saying just now. To be close to wisdom is to be close to God. It's to see through God's eyes. And that's why the New Testament identifies wisdom with Christ, the Son and Word of God. In Jesus, all the wisdom texts of the Old Testament acquire their definitive culmination. But I emphasize that what I personally love about the Hebrew Scriptures, and the reason why I've studied the wisdom literature, is precisely because Jesus' presence is not explicit and not always so obvious, and yet it's there. And the New Testament cannot be understood without the Old Testament. It's incomplete without the Old Testament. So for me, to enter the Old Testament is like digging for treasure. There's something about the element of that which is hidden, which is both attractive and yet elusive. And I think there's something about it that we don't control. Yet we have the faith and the trust that there's a very valuable treasure, a potential encounter through that word, through the Scriptures, which has a meaning for us and which we can take, and which can take us to deeper meanings. So as the entire Bible has a message for us, and as Christians, we believe that the Word of God is Christ himself, I think the wisdom literature in a particular way offers keys and clues to living with more purpose and with a deeper meaning. So we're going to look at one chapter in the book of Job. It's a poem, not the entire thing because it's quite long, but at least some bits of it. It's called the Hymn to the Mystery of Wisdom. And well, I'll ask somebody actually to read these first 11 verses. We'll focus more on these and then just touch upon the rest. So whoever would like to just read it aloud, open your mic.
Surely there's a mind for silver. Can I go ahead?
Go for it, Maureen. Thank you.
Surely there's a mine for silver and a place for gold to be refined. Iron is taken out of the earth and copper is smelted from ore. Miners put an end to darkness and search out to the farthest bound the ore in gloom and deep darkness. They open shafts in the valley away from human habitation. They are forgotten by travelers. They sway suspended, remote from people. As for the earth, out of it comes bread, but underneath it is turned up as by fire. Its stones are the place of sapphires, and its dust contains gold. That part no bird of prey knows, and the falcon's eye has not seen it. The proud wild animals have not trodden it. The lion has not passed over it. They put their hand to the flinty rock and overturn mountains by the roots. They cut out channels in the rock, and their eyes see every precious thing. The sources of the rivers they probe, hidden things they bring to light.
Thank you, Maureen. So we have in the first part of this beautiful hymn, this poem, the opposition highlighted throughout these first 11 verses is kind of this surface to depth, immediate proximity to mediated distance. And we have the precious metals, gold, iron, copper, and the human ambition to find them and possess them. So these precious metals, in a sense, that symbol for treasure. And we see this continual desire for treasure, for looking for and digging for hidden treasure. Objects hidden and unrefined. So this kind of process of refining, the process of removing the mediating materials, and then verse 2a speaks of iron being taken from the dirt, the dross. And even when valuable materials are on the surface, that mediating dross, nonetheless places them on the other side of that necessary process of sifting. Whether on or below the surface, we always need to do this kind of mediating work. It's necessary in order to extract something more valuable from what we have immediately available, from the immediately available but less valuable materials. And then verses 3 and 4 turn to the work of mediation between that surface and the depth, carried out by a subject, in this case, the human being. And we have this kind of imagery, exploring the possibilities of searching and finding without light. There in verse 3 it says, he puts an end to darkness. Miners put an end to darkness and search out to the farthest bound the ore in gloom and deep darkness. And it's a bit that symbolism of our own search for treasure, our own search for wisdom. There's moments we just feel we're in the dark. We don't know what's right and wrong. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to act, how to live in these trying times and in this kind of strange change of era, if you want to put it that way, that we're living. And so human beings, there's still that ambition. Well, we want to get something out of this, and they open shafts in a valley away from human habitation. They're forgotten by travelers. They sway suspended, remote from people. So we shift from these images of darkness to those of loneliness. All this activity is done apart from settled society, even from nomads. They're forgotten by travelers. And this time as well has a lot to do with loneliness. I mean, we're all kind of shut in our own homes. Then verses 4, 5, and 6, which were in the previous slide here. We return to the world of objects and the opposition between surface and depth. And this time the opposition is exaggerated. No? Here we have verse 5, which evokes the pastoral scene of food sprouting from the earth. No? As for the earth, out of it comes bread. And it's followed by and contrasted to the violence that lies just beneath. But underneath it is turned up as by fire. And there that land is that mediating line between the fire and the food. You know, the verdant, cultivated, nourishing, I don't know, maybe a wheat field or something that then becomes bread. And verses 9 and 10, again, 9 to 11, return to that subject of inquiry, of search. The difficulty of the mediation is emphasized, even though much has been accomplished. The hardness of the flint and the mass of the mountains are circumvented by effort, and the result is that the eye sees every precious thing, and its hidden things he brings to light. The sources of the rivers they probe, hidden things they bring to light. And the verses 7 and 8 there in the middle highlight the difference with animals. So the subject animals here, such as the birds of prey and proud beasts, or the falcon, are animals capable of seeing and traveling great lengths, even more than the human being. And yet they're not able to reach where the human beings can. They might be stronger, they might have a sharper eyesight, but they don't have that gift of wisdom. They're simply instruments to instruct the reader that, that's not us. We're not as strong or as fast or as acute, with such acute eyesight as these animals. But the human being, through his effort, through his ambition, animated by our desire, and that's the force that pushes humans beyond the animal realm of surface and light and into the dark depths, into the depths here symbolized by the earth, and that kind of image of mining for treasure, mining for these precious metals. Entering and seeking these hidden things, this hidden treasure of wisdom. So there, verse 12 says, "But where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding?" Still, it's elusive, no? And only in this verse and the next section, verses 12 to 19, which I invite you to read on your own time, we understand that this whole search is about that which humans cannot find. So I think here in the next slide I have the next few verses. We hit against that fundamental problem of human limitation. Verses 13 and 14. "Mortals do not know the way to it, and it's not found in the land of the living. The deep says, 'It's not in me,' and the sea says, 'It's not with me.'" So where is it? Where is wisdom? Where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? It keeps being evoked by and yet displaced with each of the different precious metals in the next few verses 15 to 19. It cannot be gotten for gold. You can't buy wisdom with gold, and silver cannot be weighed out as its price. And so forth. All these precious metals, and yet that's not it either. So we hit that kind of human limitation. But this poem is carrying us through on this journey via human accomplishments, being able to mine these materials out of the earth, out of the hidden and dark earth, and towards what they evoke but cannot represent. So they are evoking wisdom, that precious treasure of wisdom, but at the same time it's not that either. And the last part again, this verse 20 repeats the question of verse 12. But where then does wisdom come from? And where is the place of understanding? It's hidden from the eyes of all living, concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and Death say, we have heard a rumor of it with our ears. God understands the way to it, and he knows its place, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he gave to the wind its weight and apportioned out the waters by measure, when he made a decree for the rain and a way for the thunderbolt, then he saw it and declared it. He established it and searched it out. And he said to humankind, here in verse 28, it's like the concluding key, truly the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. So that verse 28, in a sense, gives us the answer. That fear of God doesn't really mean fear in the sense of being afraid, although in some senses you could think of it that way. But in the wisdom literature, the meaning is more in terms of reverence of God. It's that humble recognition of our human limitation, of our human limits of understanding. It's that humble recognition that I am not God, and that I, as a human being, as a limited human being, can't fully understand God or the world or wisdom itself. It's a respectful acknowledgement of God's freedom and God's ability to disturb even what is understood. And there, in that place of fearing, revering the Lord, we touch upon that wisdom. Because wisdom is a gift, wisdom is a grace, and God can give it to us in a very real sense when considered from the perspective of human beings. That fear of the Lord is wisdom, insofar as wisdom exists because the fear of the Lord guides, steers, and leads the wise person. The fear of God inscribes transcendence within that wise person, that person seeking wisdom. And that's what keeps the sage's pursuit of wisdom indefinite. No? A truly wise person will never say, oh, I'm wise. They'll always be saying, well, I'm looking for wisdom. I'm on this search constantly. I'm digging for it. I'm discerning it. I'm trying to separate that precious treasure from the dirt and the dust of everyday life. And that's really, what our call is as Christians. I wanted to put this little parable here, Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid again. No? And then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. And just to bring us full circle to that sense of wisdom as a treasure, that wisdom that we're searching for as something so precious, that treasure that's hidden in the field, hidden in the earth. No, we were talking about mining, about digging, about going deeper within ourselves, discerning that treasure, that those precious metals from the dirt that hides them, that surrounds them. And in a very real sense, when considered from the perspective of human beings, the fear of the Lord is wisdom. No? And it's that sense that we're always on a search. We're always looking. We're always trying to seek for that treasure. And I like this parable, and I wanted to highlight it because the next brief part of what I want to share with you is just a bit of a taste of my own work with the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of Kohelet in the Hebrew Bible, and the sense of joy, because I wanted to highlight this word joy. This person finds this treasure in the field, and it says that he goes and sells everything in his joy, in that joy of having found the treasure. Because when we taste, when we touch even just a bit of that wisdom of God, when we're close to God, when he grants us the gift of seeing through his eyes, through his perspective, we experience joy, we experience consolation. And joy, when I speak of joy, I'm not talking about a superficial happiness, but profound joy. And I think they're different. Actually, I'd like to hear from you. How would you differentiate just a superficial happiness from profound joy that we can experience? What do you think? Anyone can feel free. Maybe those.
Profound joy is more long-lasting, and superficial happiness is very short-lasting.
I would say joy is like perhaps an inside, from the inside out, whereas happiness would probably be something external, making you happy, whereas joy is coming from inside. So kind of irrespective of the situation.
I think joy can also be more resilient. I think sometimes happiness can be sort of brushed away, but the minute some sort of stress comes into your life or some sadness, whereas joy is often a deeper rooted feeling, which is a bit more resilient to the other, the changing nature of our lives.
Monica, do you remember the movie Inside Out?
Yeah.
I think that for me is the image. Joy, the protagonist, she has to, basically her world is destroyed and she has to find that she can walk with sadness and with the other emotions to be real. Before she was all the time. But then many things happen in their life, many crises in the life of the girl. And so Joy found that she could be alive and herself only working with the other sides of life.
So she matured.
Yes.
I like that. I like that sense, what Toby was saying about the rootedness, no? And it's the sense of walking along with the other emotions, with what life brings, because we don't control what life brings or what it doesn't. And I think here, the next slide, I don't remember, but it's this prayer of serenity, no? Which is, for me, a sense of kind of this definition of wisdom. And a prayer that I think is very useful at all moments of our lives, but especially in this time that we're living now. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because wisdom comes in very handy to know what it is I can change and what I can't. And for those things that I can't change, that acceptance allows me to live things in another way, with a deeper peace, with that joy. And with that joy that is rooted, that it's not just this kind of happiness that someone said just is brushed away because something good happens or something bad happens, because of circumstances that are very changeable. So just a quick glance at joy in the book of Kohelet, and maybe it's a challenge for all of you, because perhaps some of you know a little bit of this book, or you've heard some things and you think, oh, what a pessimistic, negative book. So actually there is something about joy in this book. Maybe it will spark your curiosity to go and read it. But beyond all the different interpretations and the contradictions that are included in this book, there is a call to joy. The Kohelet calls the human being to enjoy life. And joy in this book is presented as a gift from God. And there's 7 specific statements, joy texts, and they're listed here. In chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 5, so forth. And actually, interestingly, in proportion to text length, the root for joy in Hebrew, simchach, occurs most frequently in Kohelet as compared to the rest of the books of the Hebrew scriptures. So it's quite significant for those who would say that Kohelet is just a negative and pessimistic book. I think there's a mixture of that, and just what Valentin was saying now about this Inside Out movie or film. You have that sense of, well, actually joy needs to walk alongside sadness and anger, and it needs to be integrated in life as it is in reality. You know, it's not just this kind of dream life that we think of when we're young and innocent, but when life starts to hit us in the face and we crash and hit reality, you have to grow up and you have to mature. So that's why I find this book quite appealing and quite provocative. No? Joy is presented in a very material and concrete dimension, and you'll see repeated throughout in those joy texts in the previous slide. Later we can share it with you if you want to go and read those particular verses. But it's seen in terms of eating, drinking, and enjoying life. Very simple things, no? And at the same time, within the frame of the hard work that the human being is called to live each day. Because we all have a mission, a purpose. We all need to do something with our lives, dedicate our lives to some sort of service to our fellow human beings. At the moment, for all of you, it's to study so that one day you can serve your fellow human beings in whatever you're studying. And joy is that most evident fruit of the work, of the labor of the human being. Because when the human being works with purpose, with meaning, that brings a deep joy. Just an example of a bit of the text of Kohelet, and an interesting detail to point out. There are certain questions of purpose that are repeated throughout the book, and in the first half of the book they're responded to by the joy texts. So for example, in chapter 2, verse 22, the question is, what then does a person get out of all one's possessions, and by weaving plans in one's mind, in all one's labor under the sun? What good is it? What good is all the work we're doing for? What am I getting out of all this digging for treasure? And the verses pretty much right afterwards give a reply, give a response. So 2:24-26 say, "There's nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and provide themselves with good things from their labor. Even this I saw is from the hand of God. For who can eat or drink apart from God? For to the one who pleases God, he gives wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the one who displeases, God gives the task of gathering possessions for the one who pleases God. This also is breath and a chasing of the wind." For those of you familiar with the text and perhaps with more traditional translations, you'll think, oh wait, there's a word missing there, or what is this about breath? It's, in most traditional translations it says this also is vanity and chasing the wind. And that's also one of the very frequently used words in the book of Kohelet. In Hebrew it's hebel, and I've chosen to translate it as breath because in the more literal meaning is breath, vapor, something that passes, that is ephemeral. But St. Jerome, when he translated the Bible, chose to translate as vanity. But I think that sense of vanity gives it a bit of a negative tone, no? As if our work were in vain, no, and for nothing. And I think that there's a deeper message. I think sometimes that might take us off track, because our work is not for nothing. And the very fact that God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy is in a sense God's response to our work, to our efforts, to our search for God himself. So I'm going to share with you one more text from Kohelet, or maybe two more, I'm not sure. Well, this one here from in chapter 5, 17-19, is another joy text, just so you get another sense. "Here is what I see as good. It is appropriate to eat and drink and prosper from all the toil one toils at under the sun during the limited days of life God gives us, for this is our lot, or our portion. Those to whom God gives riches and property and grants power to partake of them, so that they receive their lot and find joy in the fruits of their toil, this is a gift from God. For they will hardly dwell on the shortness of life, because God lets them busy themselves with the joy of their heart. So it touches upon another theme, which I mentioned briefly when I spoke of the word vanity, or hebel, breath. And it's the sense of our life is passing, our life is brief. We're here today, and whether we're here tomorrow, nobody can, be sure of it. And that's also part of wisdom, that sense of recognizing and acknowledging that we're limited, that we're mortal, and yet at the same time, it's counterbalanced by that gift of God's joy. And one of the last joy texts in the book. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. However many years mortals may live, let them, as they enjoy them all. Remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that is to come is vanity. Here I left it as vanity. Rejoice, O youth, while you are young, and let your heart be glad in the days of your youth. So some of you were asking, well, is it possible to be wise at 20? Because we associate wisdom with the aged, the kind of wise old person who has years and years of experience and so much wisdom accumulated. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it really goes hand in hand. I think I know a lot of older people who aren't necessarily very wise. And at the same time, I think there are some young people who are wise. What spontaneously comes to my mind, I'm sure most of you have heard of this young Italian boy who was recently, was he beatified or canonized? Carlo Acutis. No? Carlo Acutis. That simple example, of someone who, at a very, very young age, had a very deep wisdom, had that close communion with God, had a very clear vision of the sense of life and the sense of things, and in the midst of his illness, which took him at a very young age, he lived those years of his youth and of his illness even with great purpose, with great meaning, and transmitting a great joy in the midst of his suffering. So he knew how to reconcile suffering, sadness, pain, together with the joy that comes from that closeness to God, and his closeness with Christ. So I think that a young person can definitely be wise, and oftentimes even wiser than many others who haven't managed to learn from experience for whatever reason. And it's very sad when you see someone come to the end of their life and not having grasped the meaning or their purpose of their own life or their mission on this earth. So rejoice, O youth, while you are young. Don't waste time. And let your heart be glad in the days of your youth. Here follows a part of the verse that's been quite controversial. Even many scholars and even Jewish scholars trying to interpret don't know how to kind of make sense of this, because it says, follow the ways of your heart, the vision of your eyes. Yet understand regarding all this that God will bring you to judgment. Follow your heart, follow what you see, but at the same time know, in the end, God is the judge. Banish misery from your heart and remove pain from your body, for youth and black hair are fleeting. Youth is momentary. Before you know it, you're not young anymore. Some of us here in this Zoom can attest to that. But I think the message really that Kohelet tries to give is to enjoy the moment, to enjoy the present moment. Enjoy the now where you are in these days of your youth. And also that youth is relative. I think there are also many 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds who are very young, maybe even younger than some 20-year-olds, because they're truly wise, and young at heart. So I like these words applied both to youth who are truly young in terms of age, but also young at heart. Because wisdom doesn't depend on age. It's a gift. It's a gift that we can cultivate and take care of. So I think I'll leave it here. We have a few minutes left in case there are any reflections. I invite you to bring up any question or any thought, maybe just an insight or something that calls your attention, comes to mind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That was very nice, and yeah, I'd like to hear everyone's reflections also. I had one actually. I particularly liked your analogy of the mine at the beginning, and the trying to search for these precious materials for a few reasons. One, because I think there's a lot to be said there. I mean, I guess we're not familiar with mining in today's in a hands-on way, but if you consider it for a second, I guess there's a few pieces of practical wisdom there, such as when you do mine, often once you've got the ore or something, or the metal, you can no longer really stay in that area. Your choices are to either go deeper in your current direction or to change direction, which I think is interesting. It shows us in life as well. We can't be stationary. We have to have that courage to either dig deeper into something or to change our course. And then secondly, I think again with the mining, you find these precious materials, these silver, this gold, in amidst, as you said, dirt and rock, very ordinary moments of life. I know a lot of people think that when we speak of spiritual sort of wisdom and sort of gifts, that it's this big heroic journey, whereas actually I think wisdom is given to us in amidst very ordinary times of our daily life, much as gold is found amongst the dirt and the rock. So yeah, I think I really enjoyed your talk. So thank you for that. If anyone else has something to say, I would like to hear it.
Thank you, Toby.
I just want to go off what Toby said. I loved the miner's line. I also, what chapter was that in Job? What chapter was it in Job?
Sorry, chapter 28.
28. Thank you. I love it because it's like imagining a mind and imagining someone's soul, and then also the literal dark places of like the world, like in darkness, and then like as Christians and Catholics going into that darkness, like Christ goes into our soul for us personally. We go into someone else, bringing light to their darkness. And a miner, in the analogy, goes into a dark tunnel to find these hidden gems of someone's like beauty within. And they're in a dangerous place. Like, it's dangerous because they at any moment it could collapse. Their light could go out on them. It's like it's the best. And I love it today because of the line in the Mass today is like Jesus will be a light to the nations, and we're supposed to be that radiant light for others as well. So it was just amazing. It's great wisdom.
Great, thank you, Jacob. Lots to pray about and reflect on.
I guess I would say on the poster for this session, one of the questions was how to not become cynical or become numb to the pain going on around us. How would you say that wisdom can kind of help us stay present, even if it's to the pain or the suffering?
That's a good question. I think wisdom gives us that capacity to walk together with reality as it is. Because I think also one of the questions was something like, what would a world with no trouble be like? Well, it wouldn't be the world. It wouldn't be real. Well, perhaps it would be a bit boring, but I think it's part of our human life and part of human nature to accept that with limitation comes that the mystery of suffering, which is another topic completely. But I think related to this, wisdom, seeing through God's eyes, allows us to give meaning to what we're living, and allows us to live what we do, to live our mission, our whatever that is for each one of us, our task, our service in this life, with a sense of purpose. And I think that drive, I think it keeps us from becoming cynical, because that faith in something more and something greater keeps us going. You know? I don't know if anyone else has something to add to that, or any thoughts.
Yeah, I think oh, no, Pietro, you go.
Okay, thanks. I was really struck by the very last reflection you did, the one on the youth, because I always like when authorities, like God in this case, they talk to the youth with hope, and they make it very glorious in a way. And it reminded me also of the Latin poet, I think he's called Horatius, because he said carpe diem, seize the moment. And at the same time, this thing of seizing the moment keeps coming back today, in songs or movies. And you see that we are actually using those sentences that we listen in songs in our WhatsApp statuses, for example. I'm talking about teenagers mainly. And I was just thinking that the Bible already has everything. And it's crazy that, something that makes a success, for example, in the Roman time, carpe diem and that stuff had already been written, in other words, a lot of time before. And yeah, I think we should just read the Bible more, because it's probably underestimated a lot, I guess. Yeah, just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Pietro. Actually, you're spot on with this observation of carpe diem, because many scholars, when reading and interpreting the book of Ecclesiastes or Kohelet, bring that theme together with the themes of the book, because it really has a lot to do with that sense of seizing the present moment, living the present.
I also really loved how, I know it's 8 o'clock, but I loved how you told Ecclesiasticus from the point of, or however you say it, Kohelet. I love that name. I can't say it, but I love it. How it's told in a point of joy. Your perspective there was what I feel like more of God's perspective, or like where he wanted the book to go, to like look towards. Because yeah, every other version I've heard of it is like vanity of vanities. and yeah, I loved that you showed there's more joy mentioned, or happiness, in that little 12 chapter book than all the other wisdom in the Old Testament, which is a pretty big testament, I'd say.
Yeah, we have to rescue that poor book from being left in the annals of doom and gloom.
I have a question, Monica. I don't know if I explained myself, but going back to Carpe Diem, would you connect this conception of living the present moment with the New Testament kairos, or chronos and kairos, the difference between the time that goes and is oppressive, and kairos, which is the time in which God makes himself present. So if I have all my senses open, which is also the sense of wisdom in sapienza in Latin, to save, to taste, then I can perceive that salvation is now, in this present moment. I don't know if there is any connection. I'm traveling now.
No, I think there is for sure. I mean, the Greek terminology, chronos and kairos, is perhaps not exactly parallel to the Hebrew conception. Even the words used in the Hebrew, olam, which means more eternity, and et, which is time. Maybe they're not. They're probably not equivalent on the philosophical level, but I think on the sense of reflection, I think it is translatable. And that's another whole theme in the book of Kohelet, apart from joy, is the sense of time, which can definitely be highlighted in the book. So I think it's a beautiful way of putting it, no? This living the present and the quality of the now, no? The quality which in the New Testament you would hear as kairos, not directly translated, but the sense is there, for sure.
Well, great. I just want to